Next athlete to be inducted is Dave MacDonald, and the presenter is committee member Roger Gio and friend and schoolmate of Dave. Roger. I have to lower this by a foot now.
You know, I was going to say to George Hughes, I am standing, George. But I want to say it's an honor and a privilege for me to give the bio of my very close friend, Dave. If I may, I just want a few minutes to tell you where our friendship started. We went to Central High School, which was the #1 high school in the Waterford. I think, Dave, there was 2 other schools, maybe St. Agnes and Mount Carmel, I'm not sure. But everybody wanted to go to Central. Okay. But then also, Dave and I, we played a little hockey together down at the old St. Agnes rink, which was an outdoor rink down on Lower Mahan Street. We played on the high school soccer team together. And believe it or not, I played on the basketball team with Dave. In 1961, Dave and I graduated. And then in 1964, Lorraine and I got married. And of course, Dave was part of the wedding party. So, and our friendship just continued on from there. But moving on to Dave. Dave started playing basketball in Calvin Church when he was in grade 6. Oh, yeah. You're not hearing that, eh? Yeah. When in grade 8, he was invited to try out for the high school team. He not only made the team, but was one of the starting 5 on the team that was good enough to make to the provincial finals. Over the next 4 years, Central High School went to the provincial final 4 times, winning twice. But basketball was not his only sport. In 1960, Dave was a member of 3 provincial championship teams. In the spring, Central won an interscholastic B basketball title. In the summer, he played on the Mount Carmel and Waterford junior baseball team. And in the fall, Central High won the interscholastic B soccer title. But the best was yet to come. And in the spring of 1961, Dave was captain of the Central High School team that captured the Canadian Juvenile Boys Basketball Championship. The Central squad traveled to New Brunswick to take on the St. John's squad, led by future St. FX star Dave Barry. The opening game was a classic, as Central mounted a substantial offensive attack, beating St. John's Cagers by a whopping score of 110-92. This was an amazing offensive. There was no 3 points outlined then, especially when you consider that there was only, like I say, no 3-point baskets. Better still, the 3 scorers on the Central team, Dave, Donnie McCauley, and Ronnie McGibbon, each scored 35 points. Sharpshooter scored 105 out of the team's 110 points. Amazing feat. Central dropped the second game by a score of 90-69, but recovered to win the deciding game 85-71. To allow the Bob MacDonald coach team to cop the Lord Byng and Vimy Trophy, which represented the Canadian Juvenile Championships. Not bad for a school with 130 students. Following high school, Dave turned down offers to play basketball for Acadia and St. Mary's and enrolled at Dalhousie University. He spent the next 5 years playing for the Dalhousie Tigers and the Halifax Schooners. While at Dal, he was selected most valuable player in 1963 and 64, was an assistant coach in 1964 and 65, and captained the team in 1965 and 66, being honored with the Dave MacDonald Night. During the team's final home game of the season, he was voted player of the game on several occasions. And in February 1964, he was selected Canadian Collegiate Player of the Week. He was selected Canadian Collegiate Player of the Week, However, Dave's finest moment on the court that season came as he spearheaded his Dal team to a huge upset against undefeated St. FX team coached by the legendary Packy McFarlane. At the time, St. FX were ranked number 2 in the country and were running a 6-0 record. Dal led at the half by a score of 33-30. The second half saw the score seesaw back and forth until St. FX opened up a 3-point lead, 72-69, with 50 seconds to go. Two crucial foul shots by Waterford's Mildred Budnick Sweeney got Dal within 1 point with 40 seconds to go. The Tigers then forced the St. FX turnover to retain the possession of the ball, with seconds remaining on the clock. Dave eluded several ex-defenders, and he sank a 15-foot jump shot with 3 seconds to go, sending the St. FX men to their first defeat of the season. Dave scored 23 points in leading the Dal Cagers to the upset victory. With the Halifax Schooners, Dave was member of 2 Canadian Senior B basketball teams, one in 1963 and the other in 1965, beating teams from Ontario in both finals. Dave was the starting point guard as he lined up with some of the province's finest players, Rod Sobervale, Dick Loiselle, Bill White, Barry Ross, and Dick Hayden, to name a few. Dave finished his competitive basketball career playing in a very tough Toronto Industrial League, where he was selected to the second All-Star team in 1969. While still in high school, Dave played trumpet for some of the best dance bands in the area, Roy Cummings Orchestra, the Rudy Pache Orchestra, and the Acadians. He was a member of the Pit Orchestra for several Rotary shows, played behind Chuck Berry on the Peter Glasky Show, and he toured with the Bobby Mercer Band. But he will tell you the most satisfaction came when playing with his brothers, Elmer, George, and Ray. He continues to play today with the Richmond Concert Band. Dave obtained a Bachelor of Commerce and a law degree from Dalhousie University and obtained membership in the Law Society of Upper Canada and the Nova Scotia Bar Society. He has lived and worked in Cape Breton, Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, British Columbia, and he still works in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Labrador. As Dave told me, it's a hell of a commute. So when all is considered, Dave ranks as one of the finest basketball players ever produced in New Waterford, and his 4 provincial titles and 3 Canadian championships is a true testament to Dave's ability as a basketball player. In closing, I just want to say that Dave was a major influence on 2 other great basketball players to come out of New Waterford, which was George Hughes and Billy Burns, and they also attended Dalhousie University. So it is my privilege to ask my good friend, Dave MacDonald, to come forward and accept his induction into the New Waterford District Sports Hall of Fame. Congratulations, Dave.
Yeah, sure. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, head table guests, fellow inductees, ladies and gentlemen, friends, others. A couple of years ago, maybe 3 now, I was sitting home one evening and the phone rang. So I answered, and it's Roger Guillot. And Roger says, "Hi Dave, what are you doing?" I said, "Not much, Raj, just sitting here waiting for a couple of friends to join us for supper." "Well," he said, "I won't keep you, but I got two things I want to tell you." I said, "Okay, shoot." He said, "First of all, you're going to be inducted into the New Waterford and Heritage Sports Hall of Fame this summer." And I say, "That's wonderful news. I'm thrilled and honored." "What's the second thing you wanted to tell me?" He said, "I didn't vote for you." That's a true story. And you just heard how close and long we've known one another. But there was a third thing that he wanted to tell me. He said, "Now, I know you're going to want to say a few words." So he said, "You have to remember, Dave, that those people that go there on that night, they're there to pay their respects, have a good meal, and then get home and watch the Blue Jays." He said, "They don't want to spend the entire evening listening to your stupid stories." So anyway, Raj, I'll try to pay attention, and hopefully I won't go on too long. Roger and I, as he said, have known one another for a very long time. We didn't start out in school together. He was, I don't know, 5 or maybe 6 years ahead of me starting. But I remember when we were in grade 9 together, and he gave me some of the best advice I think you could ever get if you want to play team sports. "Dave, pass the ball." I don't know, some of you probably remember that back around that time, there were 3 high schools in Central, in New Waterford. Central was, of course, the one we went to, and there was also Mount Carmel and St. Agnes. They had a high school out in New Victoria as well, but I don't think they played basketball. The big competition was between Central and Mount Carmel. And as I remembered, the expectation was if you got it in New Waterford, you were likely to go pretty deep into the playoffs. So we wanted to get as deep as we could, of course, and in order to do that, you first had to get through Mount Carmel, and they always had a good team, they always had a tough team, and they always came to play. But unfortunately for them, we had Donnie McCauley. Donnie McCauley, I can't say enough about him, so I won't say much, except that I had the privilege and good fortune of having Donnie as a teammate for 4 years, and he was fabulous. He was, and I played with Richie Spears and George, who's both, as you know, great players. But Donnie McCauley was probably my favorite because I played so long with him, and we were on the same teams together. Richie was 3 years ahead of me, so I was still learning the craft, if you will. And George was 3 years behind me, so he hadn't peaked yet. And as I told Lowell Cormier yesterday, had George been a couple of years older, and if he had been playing with our grade 11 and 12 team when he was 16, 17, 18, I don't know how to describe my feeling about this, but I don't think anybody would have beat us. I mean, we had a great team, but if George Hughes had been just a couple of years older, we would have been invincible, I think. We had a couple of, I won't go on too long, but a couple of players on that juvenile championship team I'd like to mention. One is Ronnie McGibbon. He was a great shooter. I think the best shooter probably on the team. And he would sit in the corner, stand in the corner, and make those jump shots, which I think is the toughest shot in basketball, because there's no backboard, no background. He knew how to make that shot. Sometimes he was hot, and sometimes he was not. But when he was on, he contributed immensely. It was no fluke that first game in St. John, he and I and Donnie scored 35 points each. He hasn't got enough recognition for what he's done in my book, but I knew him very well and relied on him heavily. The other guy I just want to mention is a guy by the name of Ralph Fisher. He played on our starting five. Now, Ralph Fisher was short, slow, and couldn't jump, but he couldn't shoot either. But he was very smart. And Roger, Ralph, he was a smart guy, and he kind of looked at what was on the team already, myself and Donnie and Ronnie, and he said, this team doesn't need another shooter. And he looked at what the team needed, and that was the role he filled. Because a team needs different parts, and they can't all be shooters. You can't have 5 shooters. You've seen that on teams. It doesn't always work. You need the parts, just like a car needs an engine and wheels and a transmission. The team needs the same thing. It can't have all wheels. They're all transmissions. And Ralph was smart enough to recognize that despite his physique, think Alejandro Kirk, that's who he kind of resembled. Despite his physique, he knew the team needed certain other aspects of the game, and that's where he concentrated his efforts. Any kids you know that don't think they're good enough, tell them about Ralph Fisher. He had no basketball attributes going into the game, but played with a Canadian championship team and started on that team. Anyway, I won't talk anymore about the team. I'd like to mention for a few years, Linda and I lived in Truro. Now, Truro's not a bad town. I mean, it's got a great location. It's only about an hour from Halifax and an hour and a half from Cape Breton, maybe the same distance from Moncton, and it's got a horse racing track there. But it also has a golf course in town. So when we lived there, I joined the golf course. It had men's day twice a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays were men's day. You put your name in, and when you showed up at the allotted time, there were 3 other players in that time slot to join you. And invariably, of course, during the course of the game, the conversation would get around to where are you from? Because most everybody in Truro, in my experience, was from somewhere else. And they were all, a lot of them were jocks. And when you got to the where are you from question, which I was always proud to answer as New Waterford, it seemed to me that everybody had a story about New Waterford. They either played basketball here, or they played baseball, or the bowling, or there was something. But I soon realized that when people asked where you were from, and you said New Waterford, there was always a second question. It was the same thing. Where are you from? I'm from New Waterford. And then they would ask this second question. So I learned after a while that to anticipate this question, and I would answer it before it was asked. So then when somebody would come and say, where are you from? I'd say, New Waterford. And yes, I know George Hughes. I just want to acknowledge some people who've come a long way to share this night with me. Number one, my wife Linda, who I'm thrilled to announce as my wife and has been wonderful to me all 53 years that we've been together. the other two guys, Isaac Cormier, who lives in Bowmanville, originally from New Waterford. He started working in the mine after he left school. And on his first shift, coming up on the rake, he turned to the guy next to him and said, "I don't know what I'm gonna be doing for the rest of my life, but this ain't it." Courtney Mason, who you may know, and if you have a picture of any high school class or any class maybe from Mount Carmel during the 50s, show it to Courtney, he'll probably know everybody in it. And I think everybody probably knew him. Anyway, thank you guys for coming. I also like to point out that the great Richie Spears is here, and the one and only George Hughes is here, and I'm thrilled that they've come tonight. I also want to send out a special thank you to Spike McKinnon. I've known Spikey a long time too, and Spikey did me a big favor back when I left high school and went to Dell, and thank you, Spike. I've never forgotten. Roger has said a lot about me. There were three things, I suppose, that in my career that I am particularly proud of, or think are worth mentioning. One was my record. I think it was Bill Parcells, and Gay will correct me if I'm wrong in this, but I think it was Bill Parcells said that you are what your record says you are. And my record, I played 9 years of what I will call organized basketball. That is where the ultimate game was either a provincial championship or a Canadian championship. I played 9 years in that type of system. I went to the final game 7 times, and I walked away with the championship 5 times. I'm pretty proud of that. Thank you. Thank you. Another thing is I made the high school team, as Roger says, in grade 8, and I was on the starting 5, along with Richie Spears. I was a starter on every team that I ever played on in those 9 years, and never rode the bench a game. I'm pretty proud of that too. So, finally, I guess in the form of pay it back or pay it forward, I had a lot to do, I think, with the recruiting of George Hughes and Billy Burns to go to Dell, and they both had great careers, and they both did well academically, and they both had great careers in the teaching profession after that. And I like to think and remember that I had something to do with their going there in the first place. Finally, I'm truly honored to be here tonight and to have this award given to me by the committee. It's an extremely important thing to have the town you come from recognize you for anything, but in sport, which was so much and so big a part of my life when I was younger, it's truly special. Now, as a member of the juvenile team, I am already inducted into this Hall of Fame, New Waterford Hall of Fame, and also the Cape Breton Hall of Fame, and also the Nova Scotia Hall of Fame. But this is the one, folks, that counts. You may wonder, well, you know, the Cape Breton Hall of Fame, I mean, that's a bigger pond, and the Nova Scotia Hall of Fame, well, that's even bigger still. So, you know, how can you say that the New Waterford Hall of Fame is the most special? Well, I'll tell you. I left New Waterford a long time ago, but believe me when I tell you, New Waterford has never left me. Thank you.
Great, Dave.